The 2019 draft class is 2 years into their careers, and some of these guys have had phenomenal starts, while others have had trouble getting going. A lot of you guys have found my channel through these draft grade videos, and in today's video we are going to be grading the 2019 first round from picks 32 through 17 2 years later. The reason for the split up is to go more in depth with each pick, and to further explain why each player has struggled or thrived. Now before we get started, please like the video and subscribe to the channel, as all support is very much appreciated. Now let's begin. Pick 32 had the Patriots coming off of a 13-3 Super Bowl win against the Rams and in need of a receiver. They selected N'Keal Harry out of Arizona State, a physical, big-bodied receiver who was coming off of back-to-back 1,000-yard years. Arizona State even had him run the ball to a degree, and he was a good prospect coming out in the draft. But 2 years later, he has just 45 catches for a little over 400 yards and 4 total touchdowns. N'Keal has just one game over 50 yards in his NFL career, and when a receiver is taken in the first round, they are generally expected to perform more regardless of the quarterback situation. 400 yards in 2 years is awful for a former first round pick, and 2 years later the grade is an F. 31 was Kaleb McGary to the Falcons, a tackle out of Washington. A few years in, Kaleb has had spans of play where he looks like a Pro Bowl tackle, but also had spans of play where he looks bad and doesn't look like he'll be the long-term starter in Atlanta. He started out the first quarter of 2020 with 117 pass blocking snaps and just 1 pressure allowed, but finished the season with a grade of 64 according to PFF. Having that great of a start to the year and to finish with just a grade of 64 means he is inconsistent, and that is something he needs to get better at moving forward. A C+ grade through 2 years. Prior to Kaleb McGary was the Giants selecting Deandre Baker, a corner who's had an interesting career to say the least. He had a decent rookie year, but in May of 2020 he was arrested under the charges of armed robbery and aggravated assault with a firearm. Now the charges were eventually dropped, but during all of this the Giants released him, and for the Giants selecting a corner in round 1, in which they traded 3 picks to acquire, this pick gets an F 2 years later. 29 was LJ Collier, a defensive end for the Seahawks. LJ had a woeful rookie season in which he looked to be an awful player and really an all-time draft bust. But in 2020 he was leaps and bounds better than he was as a rookie, which by the way didn't take much to be clear, but he showed a lot of potential for the future. A downside is he is already 25 years old and will be 26 in just his 3rd year, so with a player that old you would have liked to see more production in the first 2 years than what LJ's had. Now I doubt he'll ever become a 10-sack-a-year player, and he will always be a number 2 pass rusher at best, and 2 years later this pick gets a D+. 28 was Jerry Tillery to the Chargers, who, like Collier, didn't have a good rookie season. However, Jerry had a great start to 2020, and Chargers fans thought they had a great defensive player, and that he was going to prove to be a late first-round steal. However, he fell off towards the end of the year, but finished 2020 with 2 forced fumbles and 14 quarterback hits. Without a doubt, he had his best performances when Joey Bosa, Linval Joseph, and Melvin Ingram were on the field, which shows, and rightfully so I'll add, where the offensive line focus was at the time. Tillery probably won't ever be a dominant player if he is supposed to be the number 1 guy, and 2 years later this pick gets a C-. Pick 27 was Jonathan Abram, a safety to the Raiders who missed much of his rookie year due to injury. He had a decent second year, and this is a player that is very controversial in the Raiders fan base. Fans usually either love or hate this guy, with few being in the middle. He had 86 tackles this past year and is a box safety, and in a division with Justin Herbert and Patrick Mahomes, this is not a great fit for Abram. My personal beliefs are he could be a good player on the right team, but I don't think the Raiders are that team for him, considering who is in the division and what his strengths and weaknesses are. He can become a good to great safety, and 2 years in this pick is a C. 26 was Montez Sweat to the football team, who has been nothing short of good for the first 2 years of his career. Him and Chase Young on the opposite side should wreak havoc for the next decade or so, and Montez has 16 sacks along with 33 quarterback hits in the first 2 years of his career. With how the Bucs beat the Chiefs in the Super Bowl a few weeks ago, the pass rush consistently getting after Mahomes that is, Sweat could be one half of the best pass rushing duo in football, and the sky is the limit for him and Chase Young as teammates. 2 years later this gets an A grade, and I wouldn't be surprised if a year from now this pick gets an A+. Marquise Hollywood Brown was selected before Sweat, and 2 years in he has 1,353 yards and 15 touchdowns, which isn't bad production by any means. Now, what's unfortunate for Hollywood is seeing other young receivers have incredible performances or incredible years, like DK Metcalf and Justin Jefferson, for example. Justin obviously wasn't a part of the 2019 class, but unfortunately for Hollywood, a lot of the times young receivers get clumped in together. Now, it is unfair to compare Hollywood's situation to other young receivers because he won't ever put up a 100-catch, 1,500-yard year, but he hasn't been a bust either. His production statistically won't be maximized in Baltimore, and really that's all there is to it, and that makes this pick tough to grade, but 2 years in he gets a B-. Josh Jacobs was the Raiders' second of 3 first-round picks, and in 2 years he has 2 1,000-yard years and 2 1,200 total yard years. He has been a reliable player for them, but it is worth mentioning he did regress a bit in 2020, as he averaged nearly a yard less per carry than he did in his rookie season. He has 19 rushing touchdowns in 2 years, and the Raiders have their starting running back for probably the next 5 to 6 years, depending on his usage and how he holds up and everything in that general area. He was also a Pro Bowler in 2020, and hopefully he gets his yards per carry back above 4 in 2021. 2 years in, this pick gets an A-. 23 was Titus Howard, who was a tackle that was considered a bit of a reach at the time. He was coming out of Alabama State and was regarded as at least a second-round prospect, and 2 years in, I think it's fair to say he has performed like that. The Texans franchise at this point in time is a disaster, and obviously that's not Titus's fault, to be 100% clear. He isn't horrendous though, but he hasn't been an outstanding franchise cornerstone either. 2 years later, this pick gets a C-. 22 is another tackle, and it was Andre Dillard from Washington to the Eagles. Dillard was largely projected from the minute mock drafts came out that he was going to the Texans at 23. It was pretty much one Kyler to Nick Bosa, and then boom, 23, stamp it, Dillard to the Texans, which is a large reason why the Eagles jumped the Texans and made a trade with the Ravens to go to pick 22. So Andre Dillard missed all of 2020 with a torn biceps injury, and obviously with a player that's hurt, which is 50% of the sample size for this video, this makes it tougher to grade. Dillard was a good pass protecting tackle coming out of Washington, and we will see how he does protecting Jalen Hurts in year 3, but 2 years in, this is a C. This grade will probably change largely next year, whether it's up to an A or down to an F. It will largely change in a year, but it is a C for today's video. 21 was Darnell Savage, a safety out of the University of Maryland to the Packers. Savage has been a great player for the Packers in 2 years and has been a key contributor on a team that's went to back-to-back conference championship games. He had 4 interceptions in 2020 as well as 75 tackles and 12 pass deflections. Savage was a part of one of the best secondaries in the NFL this past year, along with all-world corner Jair Alexander, and those two are great young players for the Packers. The Pro Bowl appearances will come, and maybe even All-Pro if Darnell is lucky, and he has been terrific, and 2 years in, this grade gets an A. 20 was a tight end in Noah Fant to the Broncos. In 2020, Fant had a pretty solid year given what he was working with and all things considered. He had 62 catches for over 650 yards and 3 touchdowns. Now, Noah has just 6 touchdowns in 2 years, but to be fair, he hasn't had great quarterback play either. He has all the potential in the world and could very easily be a Pro Bowl tight end. I don't think there's any doubt about that. It's just a matter of the Broncos having good, viable quarterback play to help him get there. 2 years in, this pick gets a B. 19 was Jeffrey Simmons to the Titans, who was a projected top 5 pick before tearing his ACL in the draft process. He had 14 quarterback hits in 2020 and was a good player for the Titans this past year. Statistically, given he is a defensive tackle, he more than likely won't ever have a 10 or 12 plus sack year, because remember, not every defensive tackle is Aaron Donald, so please remember Donald is the exception and not the standard. 2 years in, Simmons is a great pick and will be the Titans starting defensive tackle for a while, and when you get a top 5 player in the class at 20 overall, it is an A pick 2 years later. 19 overall, by the way. An A pick 2 years later. 18 was center Garrett Bradbury to the Minnesota Vikings. Bradbury has not been good in pass protection in his first 2 years in the league, and that is putting it kindly. He has been a good run blocker though, but what needs to be said is the guard play around him has been absolutely atrocious. I don't think it's fair to say Bradbury has maximized his full ability, due in large part to that, and when his left guard isn't Dakota Dozier, who is one of the worst guards in the entire NFL, isn't next to him in 2021, we'll see how he does. Garrett hasn't been the best either by any means though, and I'm not saying if Dakota's not there, he'll all of a sudden be a Hall of Fame center, because I'm not saying that, but his situation has been far from ideal. A C- grade through 2 years. And the last grade for today's video is Dexter Lawrence, the nose tackle of the Giants. Now, admittedly, I don't like selecting a nose tackle in the first round, But Lawrence has played good so far, and he had a good second year, and has proved me wrong in not selecting nose tackles in the first round, or at least not liking them in the first round. He is a mountain of a man at over 340 pounds, and he is hard to block for a double team, let alone a single player. Statistically, he won't ever be a huge sack guy, because most quarterbacks can simply outrun him, given he weighs roughly 120 pounds more than the average quarterback, but he can be an absolute disruptor, and can be a huge, no pun intended, building block for the Giants' defensive line moving forward. It would be a wise choice for the Giants to go after defensive line in free agency this year, given this guy takes up 2 players in every play, meaning he could get teammates one-on-one pass rush situations and put them all in favorable situations. Dexter is without a doubt the unsung hero of this Giants defensive line, and 2 years later, this gets a B+, and I really hope the Giants address the D-line in free agency. And with that being said, that's all I have for today's video. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. It would mean the world, and until next time, love you guys, deuces, peace.